start the recording. Right now, the computer is being annoying. It's spinning and spinning. Can't plan for this. It's never done this before. It's just taking forever to connect to Facebook. Hello. Unable to do that. Of course, it's unable to do that because I needed to do that. Let's try again. There we go. Share on timeline, share to page. And we are going live. And we are streaming live on Facebook. Hi everyone, Ivana Taylor here. And I want to welcome you to the Monday edition of Bizapalooza Chat. We are chatting live on Twitter at #BizapaloozaChat, and we are streaming live on Facebook this afternoon. And I want to welcome you to our Monday show. And today's topic is all about podcasting, but it's not just podcasting. It's using podcasting as a lead generation tool. Really, really interesting. Not just a brand building tool, but a lead generation tool. And so to talk about that, as you know, I've always got some of the best experts in small business. I've invited my new friend, Seth Green, who's going to be joining us from Buffalo. And I'm going to spotlight you, Seth. Hi, Seth, and welcome to Bizapalooza Chat.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be sharing with all of your followers.
Excellent. We're going to have a busy chat today. But first, rather than me sort of get your bio all wrong, talk a little bit, Seth, about who you are, what you do, and what you know for sure.
Okay, so I am the founder of MarketDominationLLC.com. We are one of the fastest growing direct response marketing firms in the country. I am also the co-host of the Sharkpreneur podcast with Shark Tank's Kevin Harrington. I have written 7 best-selling books, and book number 7, Market Domination for Podcasting, is on the shelves at Barnes & Noble now. I've been on almost the alphabet soup of media. I've been on CNBC, CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, Wall Street Journal, Boston Globe, Miami Herald, #1 talk radio show and morning show in New York City, along with probably dozens and dozens of others. And let's see, what do I know for sure? I know that if you are listening to this, you are not committing the #1 marketing sin, which is being boring. So I know that all of you out there are taking the BizOp advice and you are being fascinating to your clients, customers, patients, and prospects. And we're here to get you more of the right people.
Oh, I love that. And there's something that you didn't say that jumped out at me when I read your bio. And I want to hear so much more about that because you and I share a marketing crush in common. You're like, who is that?
I have a lot of marketing crushes, so you tell me which one we're talking about, but I'm not.
Lifelong marketing crush with Dan Kennedy.
Yes.
In Cleveland.
Yes, I am the only person who has been nominated 3 years in a row, back to back to back, for Marketer of the Year, which is Dan Kennedy's very prestigious marketing award. And Dan's the one I learned a lot of this from. He's the one who got me my start in direct response marketing, where I learned everything I started off with from. So I would not be here without Dan.
Oh, I agree completely. And there is, of course, I've read a million of his books and been one of those, Gold Circle something.
Yep.
Anyway, one of the things that I heard Dan Kennedy say, and it's, there's like a million of these books and CDs and things he talks about. And, it all turned to wah, 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 wah. Before and after I heard him say this. And I repeat it all the time and tell folks that it's Dan Kennedy that I learned it from.
Repeat that, wah, wah, wah,
That's pretty good. Dan Kennedy says, and this has been a mantra for my business, is something I encourage everyone to do. Most people have Most people sell things so they can have customers. I have customers so I can sell them things.
Exactly.
I get chills every time I think of that and I say that. And Dan Kennedy was probably, of course there was Jay Abraham and all those folks too, but this idea of building a relationship, a direct relationship with your customer. I mean, these guys were the kings of having that printed newsletter and sharing your personal pictures. They were social media before there was social media. And so I would like to know your direct marketing story. So, I told you mine, now you tell me yours.
Sure. So I started out as a financial advisor. I worked for A.G. Edwards, which used to be a Fortune 500 investment firm back when they existed. And when I got back from training after passing my licensing exams, my branch manager says, I got you something. I got you a book where all of your clients are going to come from for the rest of your career. So I got super excited. I'm young. I'm dumb. I'm thinking I'm going to get a Ferrari. I'm going to buy really big speakers for my stereo in my apartment. This is going to be great. Give me the book. And he reaches behind his desk and with a thud puts the entire yellow pages on the desk, literally the phone book. And he says, they're all in there, Tiger, go get them. So I made 300 cold calls a day, interrupting strangers, asking them for money. I think you hung up on me once or twice, and I'll forgive you. And it sucked, if I'm allowed to say that on your show. And I said, there's got to be a better way. This is way before Al Gore claimed he invented the internet. So I said, there's got to be a better way. And I started looking for one. I found Dan Kennedy. And I started buying everything I could until the time came for me to talk to Dan himself, when he told me everything I was doing was wrong, because it was what my industry taught me. The cold calls and the mass mailings were all wrong. And if I wrote him a really big check, he would change my life. Now, obviously, his pitch was a lot longer than that, but I'm shortening it for this purpose. So I went home and I begged my wife. We'd been married a year. In that year, we had gotten married, bought our first house, had our first baby, and she had quit her job to be a stay-at-home mom. This is while I'm cold calling for a living, so kind of a little stressful. And then I had to go ask her to let me borrow the money to go hire Dan, which was, more than our mortgage at the time. And I asked her for 30 days in a row. She said no, more and more vehemently for 30 days in a row. And then on day 31, she said, you better pray this works. So I went to work with Dan. And when I started, there were 6,700 advisors, financial advisors, reps at A.G. Edwards at the time. I was one up from the bottom. I was 6,699 in terms of revenue. And after 2 years of working with Dan, I was in the top 30 nationwide for opening new accounts. So it worked really, really well. It got me written about in 3 trade journals and 3 books for financial advisors. My phone started ringing off the hook with advisors saying, how do I be you when I grow up? How do I do that? I said, Dan, what do I do? He said, start a marketing company and do it for him. So 10 years ago, I started MarketDominationLLC.com. It started out as just me and one advisor who wanted to license the content I had created to see if it would work for him. And it's taken off. Now I've got an office building full of an amazing team. We've helped hundreds of thousands of folks literally around the planet. We branched out from financial services to about 72 different industries where we're doing our style of Dan Kennedy inspired direct response, cutting edge marketing to help them grow their businesses.
So I got to ask you this question, and I don't know if you can answer it. I hope that you can. I'm really, really taken by that out of 6,000, all these, you were the next to the last one. What was that pivotal piece of, I don't know, advice, coaching, what you learned from Dan Kennedy, that one thing out of a few, I'm sure, that you feel made that 80% of the difference in your jump from bottom towards top?
Identify a really micro niche specific target market, create a lead magnet or bait that is customized to them, drive them to go get the bait, and then in multiple forms of media automatically drip on them until they buy or die.
Okay. I am so excited about this conversation. I'm excited that I'm having it with you, because one of the things that I've noticed is that lots and lots of people give exactly that advice. And there are just as many gurus out there, do this, do this, do this, right? And the most basic example I could think of, and people write books about it. People write, you've got, I want to be like Steve Jobs. Well, then do what Steve Jobs does. I want to be like Gary Vaynerchuk. Well, then do what Gary Vaynerchuk does. And Gary Vaynerchuk gets up there and says, oh, you can do this, so on and so forth. I am sorry, Seth. It is not just in the doing, it is in the being, I think. And so I want to know what's underneath that, because everyone gives the same piece of advice. What I want to hear from you is, I think what anybody in the audience might say is, well, I've already done that and it's not working. So I want to know what your journey was. What's underneath that?
Okay, so if you're already doing it and it's not working, there's a couple factors. Either you've got the wrong bait, or you're fishing in the wrong pond. So either your messaging or your target market is off. If both of those are right, then it's going to be probably your mindset. So what I just wrote, I write for Funnel Magazine, and I just wrote an article for issue 5 on my own journey in terms of when I am living in fear, when I am in a negative, dark place, our marketing doesn't work so well. When I am excited, when I am optimistic, when I am certain, when I'm in a good place, magically our marketing works and our clients get sales and they're happy.
Yeah. Mindset, right? So I guess I'm going to go to the question that I actually pre-prepared, right? How did you practice those skills? I'm willing to bet, let's go back to the being from the last on the list to the top of the list, and identifying a target niche and coming up with a bait and the lead magnet, all those things that we know we should be doing. I'm pretty sure that, or maybe was it the very first time you threw it out there, it generated leads? What actually happened and how did you hone that skill?
10, 13 years of practice. No, it didn't. I didn't hit a grand slam home run the first time we did it. The first time we did it, I had built with Dan's inspiration, it was a seminar. It was a seminar, financial services seminar, and it was the 7 biggest retirement planning mistakes. And I had done a multi-step direct mail campaign to get people to attend and heard crickets. Nobody cared, nobody RSVP'd, nobody called. So Dan said, I could just give you the answer, but I'm not gonna. I'm gonna make you work for it. Go call a bunch of the people from the list and ask them why they didn't respond. And it'll be a very valuable lesson until you've talked to enough of the people, and you got to talk to enough to get a valid sample. And the sample, the answer I got was my headline, my title of my workshop, retirement planning, top 7 retirement planning mistakes, was wrong. Every person was like, oh, I probably made more than that. I probably made 10 mistakes. I made 15 mistakes. Why do I need to come see these 7? So I rewrote the headline to how to overcome the top 7 retirement planning mistakes, sent it out again, and magically we had a full house.
You just hit on something so brilliant. It's something that I do, and people can't believe that I do it. And I can't believe more people do it. You said, call the people from the list and ask.
Survey the non-responders.
Survey the non-responders. That is like tip of the week.
Thank you.
Right? That is tip of the week. I'm actually in that process right now, not for me, but for a client. And I think that, let me ask you this, survey the non-responders. How did you get them to talk to you? Because a lot of folks
I physically picked up the phone and dialed it and asked them. And again, I was used to making 300 cold calls a day. So this was calling strangers and asking for something was nothing new. The only difference was this was easier because I wasn't asking them to invest money with me. I didn't want to check. I wanted to, hey, did you get it? The way I framed it was I was calling to apologize. They sent it and they were one of the people who didn't respond. So we figured something must have gone wrong. We must have offended them in some way. And they said, oh, no, you didn't offend me. I'm just not interested. And I'd say, oh, well, just, for educational purposes, do you mind sharing with me some feedback on what about it didn't resonate with you? And then they opened the floodgates and started telling me what they didn't like.
Brilliant, right? Exactly. So so now I want to ask a transitional question. What's the relationship between podcasting and direct marketing? How do you see those two? Because, I have my own ideas, but I'm kind of curious as to how you related podcasting to direct marketing.
Sure. So in my book, Market Domination for Podcasting, which will tease your listeners, they can get a free copy of it if they want. And in my, I had interviewed 20 of the top podcasters in the world, guys like John Lee Dumas, people with audiences in the millions and millions. And there were commonalities. It was kind of the Think and Grow Rich model. I was trying to figure out what made them so successful and what they did and how they grew. And what I realized was it was great, and I figured that out, but it wasn't going to work for the normal small business owner. Joe the chiropractor is not going to have 10 million downloads on his podcast in Podunk, Iowa. So I said, I got to start over. I got to come up with a way for Joe the chiropractor, who might get a couple hundred or a couple thousand listeners at the most without spending serious money. I got to come up with Joe the chiropractor. I got to give him a way for the podcast to work and turn into business that's measurable without spending a bunch of money. So I did that, and I figured it out, and we tested it we took 5 of our clients and said, hey, want to be a guinea pig? We won't charge you for this one because it's an experiment. Will you do it? They said, sure. They did it. It worked. And then we realized we're onto something here, and we launched it as a service, a done-for-you service, where we produce a podcast for you. We turn it into a book for you. We do the book launch. We make you the authority in your marketplace, and we use it to generate business as the front-end lead generation magnet of a new funnel. And it worked, and has worked for probably the last 2 years, just about every time we've done it.
Well, that's really impressive, because I've worked with quite a few small business owners that are in some interesting niches, anything from like awards and trophies to, of course, specific kinds of software. Now, one of the things I found in meeting these folks is they want to be perceived as the expert in their field. They're all about it. They buy into the promise and the outcome and the solution. What becomes really challenging for them, and I'm kind of curious as to how you work this around with your clients, is they struggle with identifying how they're the expert. They just really struggle. They like the outcome, but they don't know how to get to the outcome. So before you work with folks, what are some of the things that they should be able to do? What should you have in place? What should you be able to do? What should you be prepared with before you embark on this journey to create all this amazing content?
For most important thing, and it informs 50% of the success or failure of any marketing campaign, is a definition of who your target market is. And 80% of the businesses and entrepreneurs we talk to think they know who it is, but they don't have it defined correctly. They don't have it defined tightly enough. What's
a tightly defined niche look like? Because I know, anyone who uses a computer, I'm like,
Okay, so a badly defined niche would be a dentist who says, I can help anybody with teeth. And this is a literal client case study. We literally had a client as a dentist who said that. A tightly defined niche, which is what we created for him and reinvented his entire practice and changed his life, was I work with women who have been divorced 40 to 55-year-old women, affluent suburban women who've been divorced in the last 6 months, are starting to date again, are terrified of competing against younger women, and want to do something to improve their appearance and self-confidence, but don't want to have plastic surgery.
Now, how do you say that, like in a tweet?
He's not on Twitter.
No,
we don't do it on a tweet. We do it via direct mail and Facebook ads.
Exactly. And do you literally write that long description down?
It's actually longer on Facebook and in direct mail.
That's amazing. I swear to God, Seth, you and I had some similar experiences. I just about fell over when you said that you were making 300 calls a day, because Glenn Ross was my life. Yeah. I used to sell long distance when the baby bells broke up. And actually the whole phone book thing, I've actually had that experience. Oh, who's my ideal customer? Where's my lead list? And the guy reaches over, grabs the Pittsburgh phone book and says, here's your lead list. There's your phone. There's your desk. Love it. Right? So
go make some money.
Go make some money, right? Can totally relate to that. And I think the other thing I can relate to is this power of, and the ability that you had. How did you uncover this niche with this guy? Because like you said, they just don't know.
Deep dive data mining of who his favorite patients were, who paid him the most, who referred the most, who was the lowest maintenance after paying them, who paid cash, large amounts of it, and then we came up with the Divorce Smile Makeover.
There it is. The Divorce Smile Makeover. That's outstanding.
Thank you.
Because I constantly have, but let's make this real. This wasn't, I think that the peeve I have, and I think I'm going to start a podcast called What's Underneath That, right?
Good title.
Because in most conversations, you get an expert and they tell you this amazing story, but they don't tell you what's underneath that. Data mining, finding all this stuff out. How long did it take for you guys? And I guess I'm saying, the reason I don't want you to like sugarcoat it, right? I think folks think that just by hiring someone that this, like, you know, the magic bullet theory, like the light bulb will come on and this magical thing would happen. I'm not saying that it doesn't and that you don't get results. I think what I want folks to really understand is what's underneath getting results like that. Tell me about that, Dennis, and how he worked and how, you know, does he do a podcast now or is this just a separate example?
This is a separate example. So it took a month for us to figure it out. We did probably 4 interviews with him and interviews with a number of his staff, and then went over, you know, his CRM system, and were able to did some profiling of clients and patients, and then put all that together and were able to pull out the Divorce Smile Makeover out of that.
Got it.
And now that's all he does. He doesn't do root canals, doesn't do cleanings, doesn't do anything. He just does Divorce Smile Makeovers.
That's outstanding. So now let's transition into this podcast conversation, because I think using podcasts as a lead generator, and I love how we're talking about repurposing this content. So you have a process for that. And how can a podcast be a lead generator?
Sure. So we use a podcast in a couple different ways. One is interview your ideal clients. Because if you go in interviewing them, the relationship is totally different. You're their new best friend. They love you for giving them exposure and putting you on, so that when you follow up after the show and say, hey, Joe, I noticed in the interview you said X, Y, and Z. I had an idea about that. You want to, set up a time, talk for 5 minutes, and I'll share it with you? And literally 90% of the time, for our clients, that guest says, sure, I'd be happy to, because they don't perceive you as a salesperson, because you didn't go in trying to sell something. You went in giving them exposure, which is recognition and fame, which Mary Kay says everybody wants more than money and sex. So you went in doing something for them and adding value, so that when you say, hey, I got an idea for you, they say, sure, and it ends up with a really high conversion rate from idea to, sure, I'll hire you for that. That'd be awesome. That's one way of doing it. We also have our clients interview their ideal referral sources. Who do you want business from? Because then they will promote that they were on the show on their social media following. They will promote on the show to their email list. And magically, all those people now know who you are. We will also have our client interview their clients, because the client will tell other people about being on the show. And if the client comes on the show and says how fabulous you are, he can't fire you the next day. It increases retention.
Ha, brilliant. So then the next thing you talked about was now repurposing this podcasting content. And I think that's what makes it really worthwhile. So talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So we take the audio, edit it and air it as a podcast on iTunes. We take the video, edit it and air it as a show on YouTube. We transcribe and edit the interview. That turns into social media posts. That turns into long form blog posts. It turns into an ebook. And then when we've got enough interviews, usually around 10, we will then turn it into a physically published, like, bookstore book, and do a book launch party, and then a book launch on Amazon, and then build a new funnel where the book is the front end lead generation magnet of like a free plus shipping funnel. And you combine all of that and it works really well.
Brilliant. So give me a sort of example of, I don't know if I want to ask for like a Main Street business, but someone in your neighborhood that sort of worked through this entire process with you guys.
Sure, absolutely. So I have a reverse mortgage broker. He is in Colorado Springs, Colorado, so local, specific. And we got him, his ideal referral sources are like financial advisors and lawyers. So I think we did 10 to 15 interviews of financial advisors and attorneys, and then did the book launch. And the book hit number 2 on Amazon for retirement planning, so it went really well. We're in the process of planning the physical book launch party and building the funnel. But even before that, because of the relationships he built with these people during the interview process, he's already had orders from them of over 1,000 copies that they want to hand out to their clients because they're in the book, so they look good. But who do you think it drives them all back to? My client, the reverse mortgage guy.
Brilliant. I think that that's really outstanding. Now, I am sure that what does that relationship of working with you look like? Because all of that sounds very difficult, very complicated, very technical, and no small business owner I know has time for that.
That's right. That's why we do it all for them. So they hire us. We do all the work. All they do is show up after the first month of build out. They show up once a week for 30 minutes on Zoom, do their interview, and that's it. We do all the rest.
Wow.
And they show up for the book launch party that they are the host of. And they send out some emails that we provide for them about the Amazon launch. But really, basically, all they've got to do is an interview once a week, and we do the rest.
Wow. Now, I don't know if I saw this in your material or if my research came up with this, but I'm going to ask you this question. Now, it's worded funny. So there you have it. Can business podcasts manipulate consumers, and how can they do that?
That depends. Is your connotation of manipulate bad or good? Can they manipulate consumers? I sure hope so. I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't want to manipulate. Now, it's funny, my podcast, Sharkpreneur, is a business podcast for business owners. So they're my consumers. So I sure as heck hope it's manipulating them into wanting to do business with us. And it is, and it's working, and I can track it, and we're getting clients all the time because of it. And our clients who are business to consumer, like my financial advisor or my reverse mortgage guy or my dentist, they're attempting to manipulate those consumers into thinking they're the authority on a topic, that they're an expert, and that they're the preferred provider of choice. So absolutely, if you do your job, you better manipulate people, and you better do a good job of it.
I think it's like a sneaky use of words there, which is why I say this question sounded odd to me, right? Because I think I would have probably used the word influence rather than manipulate, because I think manipulate kind of, in this case, seems like making you do something you don't want to do. And I don't think that's the case at all with podcasting. I think podcasts can be extremely inspirational and informative. And
I would agree, unless, David Koresh decides to start a cult podcast, I think we're safe.
I think we're safe, right?
Unless Scientology, I apologize if there's any listeners on the show who believe in it, but unless Scientology is doing a podcast to recruit people, I think we're okay.
Yeah, exactly. So
they should get, Leah Remini on the show. She'd be great.
She would be great. She's fun to watch. So now you say the podcast users make for an interesting advertising segment.
Sure. So for example, if it's your podcast, you now own the media. You can advertise to your own listeners for free, and they're micro niche specific. So my, retirement planning podcast people, the affluent baby boomers who are listening, who are interested in retirement planning, it's probably the cheapest, most targeted, most affordable way to reach them. Because if you did a radio show in your city, and I have clients who did that, spend $100,000 a year to have a radio show, and they've been doing it for 10, 20 years, and it's built their multi-million-dollar business. But if they could have done a podcast at, 90% less cost, and they could have done it easier because they wouldn't have to go to a radio studio every day. So I think that it's an interesting target market because there's no other way to niche that specifically. I mean, for example, there's a podcast on being an Elvis impersonator. I did not know it was that big a target market, and it may not be. And there may only be a couple thousand Elvis impersonators in the country, but they have a trade journal, they have an association, they have conferences, which I did not know until we got into that niche. So if you were going to try and start a national radio show for Elvis impersonators, you'd waste a ton of money because you'd spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year trying to reach a couple hundred or a couple thousand people. A podcast, you can do it for next to nothing.
You're my straight man, right? How? Because on the one hand, we're talking about reaching a very niche audience, in this case, Elvis impersonators, right? Now, how do you get your podcast found by this niche audience?
We actually have a 14-point podcast promotion plan process that we do for every single episode. I'll summarize it in that you're going to do some search engine optimization in the iTunes store so that you rank for your keywords. You're going to promote heavily on social media, via email, and depending on the target market, you could even do it via direct mail.
Right. So so it sounds like you've got
some marketing. We do some of that marketing stuff.
Some of that marketing stuff, some of that direct marketing stuff, right?
Yes.
Got it. Got it. Now, I think we talked a little bit about marketing strategies and we talked about distribution. How do you, which comes first, I guess is my question. We've been having this conversation of identifying a niche and helping you find that niche, doing the phone calls, just getting to the root of your ideal customer. That's one thing. Do you start, is the podcast the core of that entire content marketing campaign?
If that's the only thing they've hired us for, then yes, a podcast is the core of it. If they've hired us for our other services, then we would do that. We always do the strategy first, but if they've hired us for 17 other things, then the podcast is a spoke on the wheel.
Got it. And I don't know if this is like, I'm jumping all over the place, right?
That's okay.
Let's talk about some podcast models, right? You've talked about interviewing clients, referral sources. Let me jump before I even ask you this question. What are some of your favorite podcasts other than your own?
Other than my own, let's see. Ask Gary Vee, The Gary Vee Show, Tim Ferriss, Tony Robbins, and Wizard of Ads from Roy Williams, and Perpetual Traffic from Digital Marketer, and Marketing in Your Car from Russell Brunson are probably my top 5 or 6. They're the ones that I'm listening to all the time.
What is it about them that makes them your favorite podcasts?
The guests they get, the content that they teach. I'm always learning from them. I'm inspired from them. I get actionable takeaways I can use from every single episode. Stuff like that.
And is that the kind of thing that you're advocating? Because I would say I think podcasts, I feel like I'm late to the podcasting game, right? I've known about them.
It's just taken off. No, I mean, we're at 1 billion listeners now. We'll be at 3 billion in 3 years. So no, I mean, this is the new, I know podcasts have taken off many, many times over the decade or couple that they've been out. But I was interviewed on another show the other day, and I think this is the new ground floor.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, right? Because I remember, what was that thing called? Blueberry or something? That was
Burberry.
I had heard about.
No, Burberry's the coat. Blueberry. You're right.
This is some Blueberry. When was this? I think I started my blog in 2006. So somewhere around 2007, 6, 7, I was learning about podcasting and just decided not to do it at the time and went for written content as my focus. And then I thought, oh, I'm so late to the game. And I didn't listen to podcasts and whatever. But all of a sudden, just like you were saying, podcasting is like now my new favorite thing. I listen to podcasts. But the podcasts that I listen to, like my favorite podcasts are things like I love This American Life. I like really produced podcasts where there's like texture and flavor and story and different people. And when I'm listening to some of these other ones, I don't know why. Maybe because I work in marketing all day. That's why I'm curious about the ones you like to listen to and what it is about them that even though you spend all your time in marketing, you're also listening to these other marketing podcasts. They're interview types. I mean, what is it? Is it the tips? Are they highly produced? Are they entertaining or what?
I wouldn't get hung up on production value. When I started my show, the original version of it, I started it by accident. I had interviewed 15 of the top marketers in marketing for a book called Cutting Edge Marketing Magic. And I was just getting into listening to podcasts. And I said, hey, I just did a podcast is basically an interview. The best ones are interviews because nobody wants to listen to one person rant for an hour. And I have these 10, 15 interviews. Why don't I just throw them up and see what happens? Now, I didn't know any better. I aired the unedited recordings. No intro, no outro, no bumper, no music, no production whatsoever. So it was literally a recorded phone call. The audio quality was terrible. You literally heard the first few minutes of, hi, is so-and-so there? Hey, what's going on? Hey, I'm ready to do this interview. This is going to be a great book, blah, blah, blah. It was terrible. But it started getting traction and I started getting comments and emails and it started working. And I said, they're doing it for the content, not for the production value. But after I realized it was working, I said, we need to get a real show. A lot of our clients, I mean, we advise them all to record on Zoom. We do the intro and the outro. So that's about as much production as the normal local business needs. Could you go higher end? Absolutely. Do you have to? Not at all.
That's inspiring, right?
It's all about the content, not the context.
Exactly. And I think that's really that should have people feeling really good. And of course,
I mean, I did an interview with Dan Kennedy on my show to promote, I think the second edition of Marketing to the Affluent a year ago. And Dan does not do internet. And he called in, and so he wouldn't go on Zoom. We had to do a free conference call line. And for whether it was his phone, his rotary dial, I don't know what was going on. But I kept cutting in and out. It was staticky. The audio was terrible. But you could hear enough that it's Dan, and there were golden nuggets every 2 minutes. So it's one of our most listened to shows, even though the audio quality of the conversation is terrible. So don't worry about it.
That's really great. So what are some different ways that small business owners, now that they have their ideal customer, they have their niche, they've got this offer that they've put together, I can imagine that they really, and okay, you need to know they're doing interviews, but right, for these golden nuggets to come out, what are some ways that they could develop the topics? I don't know if I'm asking that the right way, right? Because you have to create these podcasts on an ongoing basis. So what's some of the advice that you give them when they start freaking out over topics and do I have enough to talk about? Am I an expert in enough? And believe me, Seth, I know some brilliant people who, when you ask them simple questions that they should be able to answer, they really struggle.
Okay, so they don't have to be an expert. That's a beautiful thing. They're an interviewer. They're interviewing other people who are experts in whatever their topic is. So we're not asking you to talk for an hour. We're asking you to conversationally read 5, 10, 12 questions that get your prospect doing all the talking. I tell our clients they should be talking like 20% of the time, and their interview subject should be doing 80% of the talking. So it's not about them being the expert. It's them interviewing other people and just having a conversation and saying, hey, tell me what you do. How'd you get into that? Why do you like that? What drives you crazy about that? Just have a conversation and magically it works.
And so okay, so how are you guys well, I suppose with clients, if you are a new startup, right? Those are the people we haven't talked about. We've talked about like Main Street businesses who sort of have clients, and then it's like ferreting out which clients you should work with. Let's go the other side. Let's pretend that you are either a new business or you're starting fresh, or maybe you want to go into a new market segment. You want to like transform something. What kind of advice do you give to folks who are brand new? Maybe they don't have clients or referrals or some of this other stuff.
If I were starting over, it'd be the first thing I would do to build a business would be to start a podcast. So it would be the best, cheapest, fastest way to build relationships. So you don't have to join 17 networking groups. You don't have to pay $25,000 a year each mastermind group you want to be in. You could just interview people, not all day long, but you could interview somebody once a week or every day. And, hey, if you interviewed 5 people a week, in 1 month, you'd have 20 new best friends.
What's not to love about podcasting? How could people really screw this up?
That's a good question. What's not to love? You do have to actually show up and do the interview. And so there's that. You actually have to do it. What's not to, how could they screw it up? Not do an interview, not show up, read the questions in a monotone voice and sound like the high school teacher from Ferris Bueller, and put people to sleep, not promoting it. We had a client once who did the episodes and then never did anything with them and wouldn't let us do it. So it just died on and didn't. So not showing up, not doing the interview, and then not sharing it with the world.
Now, is there any kind of business or type of business owner who should not do this? Or should they outsource this to even like a total third party to do the interviews?
No, they shouldn't. So I would not outsource the interview because then somebody else has a relationship with your guest, not you. We had a client who did that. For whatever reason, he paid us and we did the interviews, and it didn't work as well because those people then loved us. It was a little bit trickier to try and transition that love over to the client who they hadn't met yet, who wasn't there for the labor pains but showed up to hug the baby, for lack of a better analogy. So I would say, no, you can outsource the rest to us, but I would do the interview if I were you. And then, is there a business type it won't work for? I'm sure there probably is. We just haven't found it yet.
Give me a list of some of now you've mentioned a few different types of businesses. Give me a sort of like a random spectrum example.
Financial advisor, doctor, lawyer, dentist, plastic surgeon, chiropractor, self-help guru, author, speaker, coach, consultant, supplement company, e-commerce company. It runs the gamut.
So you have not, in all the bazillions of businesses that you've engaged with,
but that's okay.
But it's pretty doggone close. That's a long list of different kinds of people.
Yes, I think it's technically we're in like 72 different verticals, but no, we haven't found one that we couldn't make it work for as long as they did the interviews.
And one of the things that's really one of the things I really like about this idea, of course, is the efficiency of it. And the second one is, like you said, you're building relationships. So in essence, you're sort of doing cold calls without doing cold calls. You're actually building this relationship with someone.
It's not a cold call. So simply because if you are, think about it, if I don't know you and email you and say, I want to sell you my services, that's a cold call. That's spam or whatever. If I email you and say, I want to interview you on my show, even if you don't want exposure, it's funny, I had one person, we had a client in a very small town that our service didn't work for. Mm-hmm. It wasn't because of their profession. It was because whatever the psyche of this town, and nobody responded. Every single person said no that we reached out to. We sent direct mail, email, social media, phone calls, struck out completely, no guests whatsoever. So I couldn't believe it. I got on the phone and called the people we were reaching out to and was like, why wouldn't you do it? I don't understand. You don't want more exposure? And one guy literally said, no, I fly under the radar. I don't want anybody to know about me. I said, how do you get your business? He said, referrals. I was like, but you don't want anyone to know about you. He said, I don't want anybody else to know about me. I was like, okay. And we had another guy who was like, no, I'm thinking about retiring in 5 years. I don't want any more business. Like, okay. I can't do anything about that. I can't make him not retire. So other than that, so it's not a cold. Most of the time when we reach out to people, it's like, oh my God, yes. Like, thank you. Hallelujah. Of course. Because think about it, you're giving them exposure. Inc. magazine calls and says they want me to write an article. I don't say no. I say, how many words you want? When do you want?
I will tell you, Seth.
And I write for Inc. And I write for Funnel magazine. It's not a no, I don't want to. I don't want any more business. I'm going to burn it down for the insurance money. It's yes, I'll write it for you and I'll not sleep tonight if you need it by tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you something. I'm actually although I'm in the testing phase right now, I'm in the process of doing these phone calls and I'm looking for small business owner stories. I'm interested in how they chose this product and how they got where they got, because I want to share that with other small business owners, right? And one of the things I thought was interesting is exactly that. I call them up, I tell them exactly what I'm doing. And I'm thinking about featuring you in the series of articles and blah, blah, blah.
We have a script that sounds a lot like that, so we should share.
And they're like, no, I'm not talking to you. I'm like, okay. It's ended up being a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. Just saying.
Hey, listen, we've run it. We've had that. So I feel your pain. I'm sorry. I can do a better Bill Clinton than that. I feel your pain.
That's fantastic. So, what is it that all of the small business owner clients that you have that have been successful with this strategy, give me a sort of profile of that niche, a psychological profile of that business owner?
Half our clients are some type of professional practice. Again, I mentioned a list of them a few minutes ago. Then we've got a quarter of them that are companies that are raising investment capital And then the other quarter are business to consumer companies that are direct to consumer selling a physical product.
But is there a person, for lack of better words, a psychological profile or a personality profile? For example, um, I have a client who just loves to outsource things, just loves to do it. Top notch, wants like.
Yeah, I mean, our clients don't want to do the work themselves. So they've got to have, they've got to be value the getting it done for them. Money buys speed. They're not having to figure this all out. They're not having to learn it. They're not having to do the work themselves. They'd rather write a check, show up once a week, do the interview, and get results.
So they're happy to, and is it that they are, how do I say this? They're buying into this idea of setting themselves up as an expert, as an authority in that niche.
Yes.
That's something that's so important to them.
Yes, absolutely.
What do you think it takes for a business owner to make that step? Because like I said, out of the interviews I've been doing right now, I see a lot of them, it just like doesn't even cross their mind. They're like working in their business. They're happy to work in their business. And, marketing is an impediment, an obstacle, or something that like has to get done so that customers show up. I don't know. They wouldn't do it. And I guess what I'm curious about is, what is it that you've seen with these particular clients that has allowed them to step up and step in and say, I know I need to be an expert. I know I'll make more money and I'm going to make an investment in this process.
The fastest analogy I've got for explaining that is general practitioner in your town. Physician, family doctor, what do they make? 50, 60, maybe 100 grand if it's a big city. My wife has a friend whose husband is head of neurosurgery. He makes $1 million a year. Which one do you want to be? You want to be the general practitioner? You want to be the brain surgeon? You want to be the brain surgeon.
Yeah.
Brain surgeon gets paid more, spent more, is perceived as an expert on that specific topic.
Right. And then the challenge is really to help them. Again, I keep going back to this, to help them find that specific topic. That's where I just see the biggest struggle. They just don't know. Do you have like a super transformational story of someone that's like really struggled and then they got this epiphany and how they got to that epiphany? And
Sure. I mean, well, we'll use the dentist example. When we took him from anybody with teeth to Divorce Smile Makeovers, we remodeled his entire practice. It literally now looks like a high-end spa. You don't sit in a dentist chair, you sit in a massage chair while you're getting your work done. The massage chair has been configured. It is also a mani-pedi chair because you are getting a manicure and a pedicure while you're getting massaged, while you're getting your makeover. You are also have a friend that you brought with you, which is a built-in referral, who keeps you company all day, and you drink mimosas and you eat finger foods when they don't have food in your fingers in your mouth. There's aromatherapy going on. It literally
tell
looks
me about the moment when the light bulb went on for him. So you've gone through this data, you've done all this stuff, like, and what are you sitting in a meeting? Tell me about that moment. It's got to be amazing.
Yeah, he was thrilled and terrified. He's like, "You're telling me don't do any more cleanings, no more root canals, no more braces, no more nothing." I said, "This is all you're going to do." And he said, "I'm going to be giving up all those other patients." I said, "Yep." He said, "I'm going to lose a bunch of money." I said, "Nope." He said, "Because you're going to charge 25 grand for your 1-day smile makeover, and you're going to make way more money, working way less, having a lot more fun doing these. You're going to send a limo to pick up your patient and bring her to the office and drive her home. And you're going to offer a completely different experience, and you're going to make way more money working way less with less stress, less overhead, less staff." And he said, he had to go home and talk to his wife. We had to talk to her. We had to talk to some staff members to get everybody to buy into this transition. And he's like, "I'm taking a big leap of faith here, because if you're crazy and wrong, I'm going to have some splaining to do and owe money on the remodel and all this stuff, and I'm going to look like an idiot." And I said, "You won't. It'll work." And it did.
What did the launch look like? I mean, I'm sort of, once you've made that decision and then there was like remodeling to do everything, like you said, how long did that take?
Yeah, I mean, he had to close. He had to close for 3 months to get all the remodeling done. So, I mean, that was terrifying. Like the whole, I'm not seeing any patients, not bringing in any revenue, and spending a bunch of money to do this. It's got to work.
Wow. How scared were you?
I had some sleepless nights of, oh my God, I hope we're doing the right thing, because otherwise I'm in big trouble. Now, granted, we haven't physically remodeled had to physically remodel that many businesses. Maybe one or two others. The majority of it doesn't require, I mean, it's just changing the marketing, changing the website, changing social media. It's not involving physical overhauls. That one was just perfect.
That was, yeah. I mean, that had to be so rewarding. And I think the other thing that's interesting to me is that this is the peeve I've had with Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week. I don't want to let it slide because we only gave it a couple sentences of attention. Of the fact that you did do a lot of analysis of his customers. You called people, you looked at the books, you looked at, there was a lot of analysis that went in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And just FYI, because I know Tim, he did not, the 4-Hour Work Week, to make it a bestseller, he worked 80 hours a week. To 100 hours a week, because I asked.
Seth, my biggest peeve about that book and what people say about that book is I'm like, has no one read the first 2 pages of this book? Because in there, he clearly talks about just the level of work that went into creating his system. There was a lot of work that went into that. And people just gloss over that. They're like, oh, 4-Hour Work Week. And I'm like, so I think this is the focus I want to have. I don't want to deter people from doing things, but let's face it, Seth, it's hard for people who get results like yourself, who have to compete with people who charged a lot of money for promises.
It's funny because I was just speaking at the T-Rex e-commerce summit since last Wednesday, and I got home at 1 a.m. this morning and from San Diego, and I did 25 meetings. I was on stage 4 times and then did 25 back-to-back sessions with people, helping them. And I heard time and time again of people who had hired other firms, other marketing firms, who had promised something, not gotten what they were promised, and been frustrated. And listen, we're not perfect either. We don't have a 100% track record. We've had clients who screwed up what we did, so it didn't work. And we've had times where we screwed up and had to write refund checks. So nobody's perfect. We just try and be selective in terms of only taking on clients that we think we can win for, and that the win will be significant, and work our butts off to make sure it happens.
So I want to round back before we go. When you say, and this is so smart what you said, and I think this is something that you're preaching to your clients as well, you want to make sure that you're choosing the right clients with the right mindset. And I know anyone who's in our business, you've got to have the right mindset to be successful.
Absolutely. I mean, we had clients that we shouldn't have taken on that we did because at that point in business, whenever it was, we needed the money. And we looked at my team and I looked at each other, we're like, that guy's crazy. We probably shouldn't do it, but darn it, we got to pay the bills this month and we're short on, we're short on revenue or whatever it was. So we got to take it. And then lo and behold, end up in a lawsuit. Or lo and behold, end up writing a refund check, or having to have our lawyer tell them to go away. Cause we had a woman who we got all the interviews for and she didn't do a single one, and then tried to sue us to get her money back. And we said, we did our job. You didn't do yours. Go away. So I totally understand that. But if you want to learn if you want to get a copy of Market Domination for Podcasting for a download version for free, if your folks will go to marketdominationllc.com/podcast, they can get a free downloadable copy of it and access to a live training where we will walk them through the exact process we use that they can do for their business.
Perfect. So having said all that, what advice do you have for small business owners who are contemplating becoming an expert in their niche, who would like the idea of doing a podcast, but just
do it yesterday? I wish I had started sooner. And if I had to start over with $100 and a laptop, I would start a podcast to build relationships with people. I'd turn it into a book. I'd get them all to promote the book because they were in it. And that would be my entree into a new industry.
Brilliant. Well, Seth, I know you've said this before, but I'm going to ask you to tweet it and I'm going to ask you to say it again. If folks want a free copy of Market Domination, they want to get more information, where should they go? What should they do?
marketdominationllc.com/podcast for a free copy of the book. And if they want to reach out and talk to us, marketdominationllc.com, they can schedule a consultation, or if they want to listen to the show, marketdominationllc.com/sharkpreneur.
Ha. And there you have it. We've just wrapped up another fun episode of Bizapalooza Chat Unplugged, where we taught you today with our expert Seth Green on how to use podcasting as a lead generator. So it's not just the podcast. There's so much more than that. Want to thank our guest today, Seth Green. Seth, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.